But the violence, you know, and
What violence?
the absolute fascination with guns, where did that come from?
What violence? There's no violence in shooting someone. There's no violence. There's no blood spurting out all over the kitchen and
Yeah, but you've told me you've probably stabbed up to a dozen people. You've jumped on people's heads. You've done. I mean, you're violent, Mark.
No, oh God, I mean, there's violence and then there's violence. I mean,
Only weeks before his death, Chopper still had the energy to theatrically make his chilling point.
Is that camera following me? And you stand back and you go, ooh, bang, that's violent. That's violent. You start seeing the blood roll out, oh, that's violent. That's an act of violence. And you're starting on an act of violence there. That's getting towards an act of violence, in my book.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
What an idiot. The facial expressions of disgust in this interviewer are chef's kiss, amazing.
Yes.
This is pure. And right as he's sitting down, the look on her face again is just priceless. She is witnessing a little boy who's trying to impress her. And I think she thinks that this display of artificial toughness is maybe a little cute. And I think he wants to appear tough, so he calls it violent. Then maybe that's not really tough, so he backs it down a notch. That's an act of violence. Then he backs it down a notch. That's starting at an act of violence. Then there's a little more back down. That's getting towards an act of violence. Then he realizes the silliness, so he distances one more time, in my book. So I think he's then embarrassed and wants to check the camera and kind of shifts his body so he can be observed for a second. This is towards the end of the clip, not when he asks, is that camera following me? Right at the end of the clip, when he shifts his body language, this is so the camera and the interviewer, Tara, can observe him for a second. It's his opportunity to be observed. After all of this grandiose stuff, now you can take a look at me and just get a good look. Mark, I have to go with you after this one.
So, this is directly from the book of Mark Chopper Reid. And I've not read any of his children's books, though, you know, I feel ashamed that I didn't introduce my kids to them, because I'm sure they're wonderful, wonderful pieces of outsider art. Look, there's no gradations to him at all. Like, you know, in the earlier video around the crime, we see almost kind of nothing happening. Like, I just caved in your head. To this one, which is like, it's a German expressionist. It's Nosferatu. It literally is. If you go and look at those images of the film Nosferatu, you will see those hands. So I think he is directly mirroring stuff that he's seen in horror films. And that doesn't mean he's had to have seen Nosferatu, because that is one of the earliest horror films, and every vampire film after that does those hands, because it's the germ of every horror film that ever happened, pretty much. There are some examples of others, but so there's no gradations in him. He clocks the camera again to say, am I going to get in shot on this one? It's a barnstorming German expressionist performance. I would say, I've not seen his show, but I would say this is from his show. This is pretty Australian, isn't it? Because it's that Crocodile Dundee moment of, that's not a knife, this is a knife. Like, that's not violence, this is violence. It's just genius. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I don't think anything like that happened. But I think it's act. But it does tell us something, that he can't reproduce anything of what potentially was his violence at the time. It's a film version of it. It's a mock-up. It's a mockery of it, which is, again, extraordinary. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right. Yeah, you guys covered pretty much everything. This is where he attempts to give the impression that he believes stabbing and shooting aren't violent acts. This is all acting, like you're saying. We're seeing, like you were saying, Chase, these large expressions of concern, disgust, and false concern through all this. I think you're right. He's trying to impress her and trying to not that he's going to like start dating her or anything, but he wants to look cool in front of her, you know? So I think he's trying to look all really tough and bad and stuff, and it's not working for him. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, we're all on the same page. Chase, I called it incremental badassery. Well, it's not really. Well, maybe. Well, that's according to me. He just keeps adding that little gradation, and more importantly, he fishes for the opportunity. It's actually pretty good theater when I watch it, because he uses a provocative statement in body language to get her to ask a question. When he does a condemning brow, so she will fish and say, "What do you mean it's not?" And when she does respond, then he eye blocks. He intentionally stammers and stutters over her. And when he says, "What violence?" he's now going to get his chance to go and talk about his badassery. This is showman. This is everything he's doing here is part of a show. I agree with you, Mark, whether he's done it on stage or somewhere else. He's had it in his head for a while. And I love her disgust as well. It's a beautiful thing. And then he goes into this whole thing about saying, well, this is not violent. This is violent. And then he gets up and does more of that same theater, involving you in the theater again. And then he needs you to feel that he's violent. And when you don't, he's got to go back and finish that last thing and finish the opportunity out when he says, well, that's according to me. Beautiful piece of theater. That's all I think we're seeing.
So what do you got?